Well, our next speaker here is a talented man from the Ottawa region, and I met him, I don't know, a few years ago on a ridiculous project we were slaving over, and sure enough, I don't know, we spent hours together, hours every day together in some way, sometimes arguing, but always solving. Ryan is a mechanical engineer at heart, but really is a people person in every way. I would love to work with him again any day of the week, and we've solved some magical problems at different sites, different situations, sorry. And Ryan's moved off to work and deliver a facility at CFB Borden, and he is responsible to, I will say it in very simple terms, liaise between the owner-operator, Triple P side, and the Crown at the same time. So some of technically his clients are D&D, because he works for DCC, but he also has the whole idea of Shared Services Canada behind that as well. So with that in mind, I'm not going to get too much out of his presentation, because he's got a little bit to share about himself as it is. I'm going to please help me welcome Ryan Maher.
So, I'm Ryan. I'll get myself in a better spot here. I've been working with Defence Construction Canada now for 9 years, and really my role is a contract manager. I first started in the project management service line, where I worked with D&D, which is our main client, preparing slide decks really for project managers within D&D. And I luckily got picked up by the construction service line and started working with one of our newest clients, CSE, Communication Security Establishment, on their midterm accommodation project. It was kind of the first move for them to getting their major headquarters, which is LTAT or Project Board, or what's the name of the building now, Pat? Edward Drake, the Edward Drake building, and that's where I got to meet with Neil there as he was helping them with their move plans and basically anything and everything that they needed to do within their data centers. So that project was exciting. It was something new to DCC, and certainly something new to me. And I think we were fairly successful. Every project comes with its challenges, and you know, it was fun either way. Challenges make for exciting days. After that, I was with that project for about 5 years, and now I've been working with Shared Services out at the Enterprise Data Centre in Borden for them as another P3 project. This one is, we're opening the doors in about 4 months, and I think everyone's quite excited on the Shared Services side to get into a fancy new data center and start loading it up. Yeah, that's a good introduction for me. So, business requirements are really what I've been tasked to talk about with you guys, and you know, how fancy could I make business requirements? I kind of just listed them out as they came to the top of my head. This certainly isn't a total list by any means. It's just kind of things that stuck out to me as very important to my clients and what they need to achieve. When I saw Neil's slide that had it as a word bubble, like just words all over the place, I thought, damn, that would have been a really good way to put this out there. Everyone could have been like looking around, trying to figure out what I'm actually trying to say, but now I've put it right there in front of you. Spilled the beans. Anyway, business requirements are really the heart and soul of the project, and a well-defined set of business requirements makes my life so much easier. As a contract manager, if I have something that's in front of me that tells me exactly what you need and isn't ambiguous, which the next presenters are going to touch on, I believe, it really does make my job easier. You can tell your contractor, yes, this is what we need, because sometimes we will get people coming in with unique ways of interpreting these requirements, and you really need to have something behind you, a document, a set of requirements, drawing specs, whatever it is, that back you up. To get these business requirements, it really takes the client on my side, shared services right now, but for any of you, you probably have multiple stakeholders in the game. These clients all have different requirements or user groups or whatever you call them within this project, and all of those requirements may not necessarily align, which can be definitely one of the bigger challenges. You can help this person, maybe the cabling group, get something set up this way, but your racking and stacking group is going to have something else in mind, and then you might just have different coding people. I don't know what you guys call yourselves, techies, something like that. They'll want something else as well. So things really do move around, and getting those requirements tight and trying to meet them together is one of the bigger challenges at the beginning of a project. And when you think about these, like you can really have your business requirements grow and grow and grow, but ultimately it does come down to cost. And if your business requirements are out of this world, you're going to have to pay for it. So now that we kind of have our business requirements in place, let's say we finally got all our stakeholders together and we've written everything down. This is where my job kind of comes in as a contract manager. DCC goes out with different contracting methods. Our typical one is design, bid, build. That's kind of something the industry sees very regularly. We have our business requirements. We'll go to the design portion, and we'll take those business requirements and implement them into a set of drawings and spec, and we'll usually accompany those with our general conditions to make sure the contractor doesn't cheat us on whatever they can find in there. And then once we have this package put together, we go out to the bid, and this is when we go out to our contractors to go and actually build something for us. Similar to that is the design bid method, where instead of going to a designer, getting our set of our design package, and then going up to the contractor, we'll put them together. That way we can kind of reduce the timeline in the design and bid. Certainly removing that bid portion where we're out waiting. You could wait some months, and timeline is very important in a lot of these projects. So this can reduce the time. But there's another method, and my last two projects have been private-public partnerships. Now these aren't all the methods that you can go out with, but this is what I'm used to and what I've dealt with. But private-public partnerships have been my life now for 7 years. They are fun, and being a people person, as Neil said, I certainly get to meet with lots of different people from different sides of things. The process for these private-public partnerships, similar to design, bid, build, certainly. I mean, we're always trying to be competitive with what we're tendering out there. But first we go out for requests for qualifications. And at this point, we really haven't fully developed our business requirements. We're still working on that. And in a P3, your business requirements really come out in your project agreement, which is a 1,000-page plus document. And then your functional program, and this is where you kind of have, you're more specific to the actual rooms that you want and what you need. It really shows you, it is your requirements. That's the easiest way to put it. So once we go with the request for qualifications, we're still working on those two documents really. The qualifications come in, and people submit teams for, you have your design team, you have your construction team, and then your facilities team as well as financing. So we get there, let's say we get 10 responses, and we've decided we're going to take 3 or 4 proponents who will actually get to see the PA and the functional program. And then at this point, we have the four teams coming in, and they really start doing their design while meeting with the Crown, and this could be over a year, 8 months. You define that timeline, and you start producing more and more of a design, and we get to the point where the design is, I want to say 50% done, but in a data center, you're likely going to see your electrical and mechanical systems almost 100% complete by the time you're getting your technical and financial proposals. So once we receive these financial and technical proposals, time for the evaluation. There's different ways of doing this in my current project with my shared services. We did 75% weighted on the lowest cost, and 25% of the weight was design merit. So there was basically you had a list of qualifications or design requirements, I guess, that you had to meet. And there was 5 that were must do this. We have a design, an IT load, and it must meet this. But there's other things that you could score higher or lower on. Really, though, with 75% and 25%, the lowest cost is going to get it in that situation. You can have, it's just not enough. Set price is where you have now provided the industry. We are going to spend $800 million, and you need to maintain this building for 30 years, and here are the set of requirements, and you'll have A, B, C, and D. Whatever, you might even go further with potential options or items that will benefit your organization. A are must-haves. If you don't get the check in the box here, you're out. B's might have a different weight, C's, D's, E's, all have different weights, and whoever scores the highest will win that job, and ultimately start construction like right away. That's kind of the beauty of the P3. It is fast. A little more into the P3 here. Development and design, innovation, maintenance driven. So it is fast. So as we get those preferred proponents in and start meeting with the Crown on my side, or with whatever client it may be, they're driving ahead to get a design out that when they win this project, and everyone goes in trying to win it, they're ready to hit the ground running. So the design moves quick. There is a focus on innovation. I find I've done both now, the set price and the lowest cost, and there's certainly more innovation with the set price, and more competition between the designers to try and give you that that extra pizzazz in the building, or that extra feature where you got automatic blinds in this building instead of no windows. There's some interesting things you can see. Designs become a little more artistic, so that will keep people happy too. When you look at a building that is pretty to the eye, people tend to increase their score maybe towards it. Not that it's meant to be that way, but people like pretty things. Maintenance driven though, and this is the key thing with P3s. We've got the private sector now maintaining a building for 25, 30 years, and if it's designed in a way where they have to spend more money on maintenance, it will ultimately cost them more in the end, and that's not the idea. You'll see, like in the operation, maintenance, and life cycle, if you maintain something at a higher quality or more regularly, it will last longer, and that will save them money, making more profit. So construction, again, I kind of mentioned this before, speed. You get this award, you hit the ground running, you want to get in and out of there and open the doors for these people right away so they can get in. Again, quality kind of goes to the FM side of things as well. You might get a bit of a higher quality building because, well, they're going to be maintaining it as well. Operation, maintenance, and life cycle. the FM provider does have a hard job, and I see it on sites that, you know, the contractor wants to run it in their typical way, where they're in, they're out, and they're gone altogether. But the FM provider really has to keep I don't want to say a short leash, but a shorter leash to make sure that they are providing that quality that they need to maintain and ensure that they're not seeing increased costs through the project for themselves. And then the risk allocation, we are dumping some risk onto the private sector, and we're paying for that through higher interest rates than you may see on other bank loans. But ultimately, if you can't afford something, you take a mortgage out to do it, right? I can't afford to buy my house straight out, so I go to the bank and ask them to loan me some money, and I pay them back. And this is how we can actually get the facilities that we need to operate. So back into the data center stuff. Hope I didn't bore everyone too much with contracting talk, but it is what I do. So white space requirements. Some of the main things that really stuck out to me are tenants. Who do you have going in there? Do they have any specialty requirements, cabling, that sort of thing? And I'll touch on those a little more later. Rack selection, and it was very interesting to hear. Left, but about the standardization of racks, and I thought it was very interesting with the busways in the back of the racks. That's something that I'm sure a lot of people will be moving to in the future, because rack selection and powering those racks can be a tricky business for sure. Spacing, this kind of goes along with the tenants as well, because certainly for my current client, they have, you know, over 40 clients to consider in their white space, and some of these are concerned about their security requirements and their spacing and who has access to these racks. So when you're designing a white space, it's kind of nice to just do that cookie cutter, you know, here's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 or 5, however many you're putting in there, and have them all look the same. But tenants may not necessarily agree with that, so you have to consider how much space you're going to need in those areas. Move plan, this is crucial, and Neil works on these, I think, fairly regularly, because it is quite tricky to get a live data center to move from its existing space into a new space. It takes a lot of planning, and you really have to have those tenants on board with, okay, we're shutting you down for this period of time. Are you okay with that? Or do you have to have a redundant space to ensure that they're 100% live? You're moving from this place, an old data center that's less efficient, into a temporary space while you're doing this move. I can't emphasize the importance of a strong move plan enough. Redundancy, most data centers are going to have, you know, your end load, which is your normal load, plus one generator, plus one crack unit, plus one Kyoto cooler, plus one of something, or everything really. But you can also move into like a 2N or a 2N plus 1 scenario, where you are moving up the tiers of redundancy and ensuring that those white spaces are in fact never going to go down, or 99.999% of the time never going to go down. Flexibility, another major point in the white space requirements, and I like I said, I really did love that bus bar in the back of the racks. I think that is a fantastic addition to white space technology and data centers in general. Makes things very flexible, movable. And accessibility, again, where are you going to put your data center? Do people need to be at it all the time? Or do you want it away from people? Just some considerations you have to take in. Do your clients go there? Or are you remotely operating these places? So does it need to be close to major centers? Can it be out further away where you might have more land for cheaper? Things to consider. The electrical challenges. IT load is ultimately what a data center comes down to, right? Your business requirements are almost always revolving around that IT load. IT loads change, servers become more efficient. Some pieces of equipment that come in may be less efficient or require lots of load. So when planning your IT load, you have to take a look at what you have now and what you're going to have in the future. The distribution of that IT load, really, busway and WIPs are what I've seen. There may be other methods, but I'm not sure of them. But busway, so far for me, has been probably the easiest to work with, and it's very flexible. If you need to change a connector, you snap it on, and away you go. The power's right above your rack waiting for you. With the WIPs, though, there are benefits to it, because if you have space and you don't necessarily have power over there, you run a WIP and you can get it over there to find some extra space in a white area, or in a white space that you know, you may need to utilize if you're starting to fill up. You know, busways could have that as well. It's just a different setup. Receptacles are constantly changing. If everyone were to just work from one, that would make my life easier and probably a lot of people's lives easier. Yeah, a lot of receptacles. Also, single-phase, three-phase power. Typically, I'll see three-phase power and more legacy equipment with the single-phase, but still something that you need to consider when moving, so that kind of ties into that move plan that I said so critical. Load balancing, the data centers I've worked with, you've got an A and B side, and I'm sure anyone designing a newer data center is always going to be redundant and have an A and B side for their load. It's very important. I have seen it where we overload an A side or a B side, or not necessarily overload them, but put so much on one side and so much on the other that if you were to switch over and maintain on your A load or B load, you would actually overload that side ultimately. So the facility operator in the P3 projects would typically maintain that and ensure that you aren't overloading those areas or those sides or phases. But it's a consideration. And then this kind of comes down to the PDU efficiency. The load balancing is important for it, but you do lose some efficiency by underloading things, right? And unfortunately, that's kind of what we need to do to ensure that our load doesn't go down. We lose some efficiencies in our PDUs that lead to our UPSs. And we may pay a little bit more for electricity in that situation, but you have that protection on your load, or your servers, which is really the most critical part for you. And PUE, I kind of wrote that in there because, well, if you lose efficiency, generally your PUE is going to go up. But we can try and fix that with some of our mechanical considerations. Air, liquid cool. Most data centers are air cooled using crack units. That's kind of the older things that we've been seeing, or the typical situation we've been seeing. With the crack units, you're basically flooding the space with cold air or underfloor and raising it to the areas you need. And to ensure that that's efficient, hot aisle or cold aisle containment is very important. Draw that air to where it needs to be and keep it there and ensure that the crack units are getting the hot air to push things through, and that will improve its efficiency. Kyoto coolers, though, are an option of using fresh air or air, outside air to cool your data center and trying to get those 250 days a year of cooling or 300 days a year of cooling if you have a data center that can run at 25 degrees, or what's that in Fahrenheit? Anyone? No? Someone's got to know. But they can be very useful. Certainly at bringing that PUE down when you don't have to run a chiller to bring your crack units cold water. Some of the issues, though, that I've seen with the Kyoto units is humidity in the white space, which can be a problem, and I've seen it be a problem. And certainly during those hot summer days, those wheels sometimes need to to stop altogether so that you don't draw any hot air or humidity into the space, or at least humidity above the allowable ranges. They are certainly very useful at saving energy, but there are some drawbacks, and I think humidity is one of the major ones that need to be considered when bringing in outside air in whatever way you do it. Liquid cooled equipment is some of the cooler stuff I've seen is liquid cooled for sure. They've got usually very high loads and are high performance computers that require cooling directly to the components, and they can wreak havoc on a cooled water or your chilled water loop. You can see some serious drops or no drops in temperature of the water if you're on and off with these computers. Sometimes they're very specific and operations based, so if you only have an operation that runs part of the time, you will use a whole bunch of your load that you have within your white space, and then bring it back after. I don't know, I might have 2 minutes. Okay, next one, security, a big one. Liquid cooled, they can be a problem, but very interesting. Security requirements. Physical, some of the bigger ones. Security staff, they're kind of your first point, first level of security. You've got standoff distance, force protection, and perimeter fence. They all kind of wrap together, and a lot of them to just keep people away from the space, depending on how secure it is. And this will kind of come back to your tenants. Do you need people to be all the way, or can people come into this white space and actually look at your server and your setup? In all of my instances, no one can come in unless you're properly secured, so we need to keep people away. Force protection, you might need to put, like BFRs is way one of the guys I work with puts it, big effing rocks. And they tend to keep vehicles out of the way. And perimeter fence, sure, high fences, barbed wire. Shipping and receiving, another point here. I feel like I'm rushing a bit, I'm sorry. So shipping and receiving. If you can keep that away from your white space, at least you don't have that concern of a rapscallion coming in and trying to wreak havoc on your white space. You try to keep those further from your white space. That will help you. Electronic, so we've got access control, card readers, CCTV, lots of cameras. You always want to be ensuring the perimeter security and the security of those important rooms. Intrusion detection, so that's on your perimeter fence. You can have vibration sensors, and then just monitoring of rooms in general with alarms. And then personnel clearances. Really, with all of these physical and electronic security factors in place, likely you're probably going to have a very safe data center, and people won't want to get in there. It'll be intimidating enough to not bother with, and really no one really wants in there anyway. But the people who are probably your biggest concern, your biggest concern are probably people. So ensure that they have the proper clearances, they go through the processes before they have access and escort where required. Successful projects, so these are kind of the keys for me for a successful project delivery. Well-defined requirements, think about those 4 sections I talked about. So your white space, IT load or electrical requirements, mechanical requirements, and security requirements. If those are well defined, it will really help the project move along the project timeline and schedule that you have. The move plan, again, crucial. Ensure that you have, you've thought of every step, and don't be afraid to think of ideas that are really outside the box and crazy. Like sometimes that will help you, or that problem you thought of will actually happen. So be prepared. Be open to change, evolving technology. I'm sure we're going to hear more about some evolving technologies throughout the day. but things do change, so be reasonable. Maybe your business requirements through the process will change based on something that has happened and outside of your project, and consider adding that to it. And then the last one is a positive working relationship. If you can't speak with the people you're working with and have an open discussion and be sure you're on the same page with where that project's going, it will fail, or it will be a lot harder to get to that finish line. So work with the people you have and stick with what you know, and stick with what you need, but be positive and try and work with everyone. And that's it. So thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. We're going to entertain some questions here, and Ryan, I'm going to hit you with one right away,
Okay.
because it's interesting. So you talk about these business requirements, and I'm curious, it's a two-part question for you. Do you find it challenging to manage data center requirements versus the construction of the facility? As in, the facility is far more important than this one little data center that might be your large data center, compared to a say occupied facility or campus of people, and concrete's coming through and power's coming through, and then there's a data center. And then aside from that, the fact that it takes years sometimes to construct and go through that whole process, by the time you get your requirements and you finally get the facility handed over, like you said, technology moves much faster. You realize that even though you may have had fabulous requirements, your requirements don't meet the customer's needs at the end of the day because it's changed. So it's interesting. I'm curious, that concept of under designing, delivering, oversizing, that kind of concept, undersizing, oversizing, and meeting those requirements. How do you manage that?
So yeah, you asked a lot. That was loaded for sure. A loaded question. I've certainly had challenges with oversizing of equipment. Typically people or clients want to believe that they are going to use a lot more power than they expect, or that they end up actually using, and I think that's where I was trying to touch on PUE a little bit there, and loading, because if you aren't loading those white spaces up, your FM team really will have quite a bit of trouble maintaining and ensuring that the building runs the way it is. So while it's important to plan for the future and ensure that you're prepared for increases in IT load, you still need to be realistic about what you're actually going to have in there, and ensure that you have something that works for that size. So maybe a suggestion in a scenario like that where you've requested more load than you actually have is to maybe have it set up in phases where you have one phase that meets your current load and demand, and you can actually have a second phase that would have space for your next increase. It would be certainly beneficial to your FM provider and save me a few conversations that of people looking for more money. Yeah.
This isn't really my main question, but what's FM?
FM, facilities maintenance.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is kind of a comment about the security aspect that you had on your slides. Firstly, CCTV, that's not a preventative measure. Just want to point out, it's an after the fact measure.
It's your, if you're right, if you've had an issue, you at least have that film to look at,
Yeah.
and see where that issue came from originally.
To investigate, yes, an investigative measure. But I was just thinking about your comments about the rocks and the fence and so forth, and that all falls under septet, which people may or may not be familiar with, which is just simply crime prevention through environmental design, and D&D is fantastic at that. You know, you were referring to these various different things, but it's really a holistic approach that has to be taken, and CEPTED is perfect for that. I'm just wondering if CEPTED experts were ever brought in.
So in the P3 world, we definitely required CEPTED to be a part of the design. That is a kind of a one-liner in there, and the experts really come through whoever our consultant is. So yes, there are always experts in that field a part of it. It's just something to consider when you're putting your business requirements together. Sure, CEPTED might be the easiest way to put it down.
I have more questions, but I'll wait.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Ken Clough, I think you and I have corresponded a couple of times.
Yeah.
I'm one of Shared Services Principal Security Advisors for Physical Security on this project, as well as a few others. I'm also CEPTED qualified. Just to address the last question, CEPTED has been considered. The trouble is that CEPTED is essentially a holistic, low-level, baseline kind of security thing that works with your opportunists and people like that. The bigger problem we have with things like a data center is your dedicated, very skilled adversary who's intent on doing harm, whether it's the insider or the outsider, the big rocks, the guy with the truck and the bomb. That's not a CEPTED. That is a very specific type of attack, and it needs very well-engineered defenses. The point that I'd like to make for any kind of a data center, and I'm sure that Ryan, you've run into this already as a project manager and seen some of the correspondence back and forth, is that security is not well defined at the onset before you start doing your design, particularly getting into things like your layout, your standoff, how much room you have from your facility to your boundaries. You have a lot less room to play with when it comes to figuring out how you're going to do your defenses. If you've only got 10 feet from your boundary, from a road to your facility, the only option really to prevent a particular truck attack or something like this is to harden the facility. Very expensive, very difficult to do. If you can get 30 or 40 meters and keep the people away with big rocks or boulders or whatever, then your job is a lot easier. So my advice, and I'm sure Ryan would second this, is when you're starting a project, make sure you get your security people involved right from the very, very beginning, and life will be a lot easier for everybody.
Well said, Ken. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much, Ryan. I really appreciate it. We're very thankful that you were able to squeeze out of our board and come visit with us over here, spend some time. Ryan touched on some of the ideas that we spoke of last year, the concept of blasting. That was a fun topic that we butchered last year, and talking about TNT, and I think I was doing the discussion. I made a little joke about the brown guy talking about bombing, you know, and it was kind of fun. Nobody's laughing. Anyway, Ryan, thank you very much once again, and if you have any questions for any of the speakers, you know, you can reach out to them outside. If they're, I'm very certain they'll be very comfortable to share their intel with you, and you can reach out to them with all the questions you may have. I apologize personally because we are 15 minutes over, but you know, hey, sessions are interesting. Please take a few moments, step outside, have some coffee, some more food, if you are hungry or sleepy, and come back shortly. We will call you back in probably in shorter time instead of full 15 minutes. So thank you very much.